All right, so returning to assignment 4, and we're going to jump right to assignments. It's a Tuesday, we had a weekend, so it's been 5 days or so since we've looked at this. So we go to assignment 4, and we're going to go right to where we post our final logos. Logos is just shorthand for a black shape symbol, graphic symbol. You want it to be clear, you want it to be engaging, you want it to be versatile. And so what we have done so far is we have posted a refined black shape sketch. So that's mine. The next step is to open that up in a vector program to trace it as vectors. So as a reminder, scroll all the way back up here and click on the logo design and creation basics, these same slides that we've had all throughout this unit. But if we scroll down near the bottom, we talk about refined sketches. Your refined sketches can look really different. They can look like they're just hand-drawn and kind of sloppy like this, or they can be composited from different sources. You could use flat shapes you find from Pixabay, or you can cut them out with shape tools, even in Photoshop. But as long as you have pixels of what your shapes are going to be, then you're ready to move on. And that's how we'll learn Illustrator. So mine is much more the hand-sketched variety. So this next step is building it in Illustrator. And the idea with that is that we bring in your sketch and we onion skin it. So if you guys remember onion skinning from early exercises, it's when you use a sketch as kind of a blueprint for building new digital material. But the difference is we're not building our digital image with pixels anymore. We're going to build them with vectors. So I got to find it. So I'm going to open up my folder, open up assignment 4, and I'm going to go right to the AI that would open it up in Illustrator. But I'll remind you how we do it. So if this is my PNG, it could be a JPEG, it could be a PNG, any kind of online format that you could put to Canvas. What do I do to set that up in Illustrator? I right-click it. This is new for us. And I say open with, not Adobe Photoshop, but Adobe Illustrator 2025. And I have my tablet as well, because that's going to be helpful in some of the different ways we can build vector shapes. The next step I do is I notice how similar this is to Photoshop, right? There are tools on the left-hand side. There are layers on the right-hand side. So I want you to find the layers. What you'll notice, though, is the layers look kind of different. They have the eyeball. That's the same. But if you do the drop-down arrow next to the layer image, you'll see that there's stuff within the layers. So this is new for us. Now, what's within this layer? It's just a raster image. Nothing fancy. So if we zoom in, I'll see the pixels. What we want is to make this into our onion skin sketch, our sketch that we're going to build on top of. So to do that, you're going to close the layer, the drop down, and double click on it just where it's blue. That's going to open up your layer options. And I'm going to change the name of this layer to black. Actually, I'm just going to put it to refined sketch. So this is my refined sketch layer. This layer will get turned off when we finalize our vector, so we don't have any pixels in our vector, right? And then I'm going to do this setting, which is dim images. This is made for onion skinning. So I click on it, and I'm actually going to dim it all the way to 30%. Now, if you just did a pencil sketch where you kind of filled in the shapes, you don't need to dim it that much. But you want to dim it so that when you make black vector shapes, you can see them really clearly on top of your sketch. And then I say, okay. Now, it's so important in Illustrator. So important to organize your layers, and they're mostly an organizational tool, that they give you a little dedicated space next to the eyeball to lock them. So we're going to lock that onion skin layer because we don't want to mess with it. It's our blueprint. It's like taping it down to the desk. And now we're going to cut really clean black vinyl, on top of it so that it has no pixels at all. So how do we make a new layer on top to make our vectors? Just like in Photoshop, at the bottom of the layer window, there's a little post-it, a little square with a plus sign in it. That will create a new layer. And then I want you to double click on that layer and name this black shape vectors, because that's what we are building for this. This is the new skill. Now, we can also choose the color, but the color is not the color of the vectors. The color is the color that this computer will show us for the anchor points. And I like red. I like red a lot better than blue for this because red's really easy to see. So we're going to be looking at white as the empty space, black as our vector shapes, and red as the anchor points that we select and place to make our vectors. So I say, okay. Now, how can we start this in a way that we're already familiar with? I am not trying to create the white shapes. I'm not creating anything with white. I'm not creating anything with gray. I'm creating everything with black, right? So let's go to the shape tools, which is just like the vector shape tools in Photoshop. And what should I start with? Well, I could start with a rectangle. That's kind of a big shape that takes up most of this, right? But before I use that rectangle, or actually let's just use it, and I'll use the defaults. There we go. So I make a big rectangle. Like in Photoshop, it will allow me immediately to change its size, even to rotate it a little bit. It like comes in with, for lack of a better word, a transform box. Though you do not want to hit Command T when you're in Illustrator, because that will not get you the transform. All you have to do is use this large, what I call the large selection tool, the black arrow, which is like the move tool in Photoshop, and that will always get you these anchor points, and that will always allow you to manipulate the whole thing. Okay, the problem is with that large anchor point tool, I can't change the individual anchor points. I can just rotate the whole thing, scale the whole thing, stretch the whole thing. Notice how this is not a black shape. So if I click off of it, what do you see? If I turn off my sketch, we have a white shape, right? And we have a black outline. That's because each vector has two properties. It had this in Photoshop too, but we only ever used the fill property. Same thing here. You're going to select it with that large selection tool, and then you're going to change the stroke and the fill. And if this is your default with a white fill and a black stroke, you're going to just swap it, and that will make it a black fill with a white stroke. And now we need to get rid of the white stroke. So how do we get rid of it? We click on the none setting, which is a red bar that goes through it. Now you'll see there's no white cutting around it. So this is how we're going to build our vector shapes for this graphic symbol. Just black shape vectors with no stroke. All right, so now how can I manipulate this? Well, I can keep building up. I can keep using vector shapes. This is not the ideal way to do it, but it's a way that's similar to what we've done before, right? So I can rotate. But what you'll notice is if you right-click within here, you're going to have transform options, but they're not going to be warp. You know, they're going to be slightly different. Shear is pretty interesting. You play with the angles of the axis. And you can preview it, and you can shear it only horizontal or only vertical. But there's no like easy warp within just the right click inside. So, but what you can do is you can do a lot of copy and paste, right? You can do Command C, Command V. And I'm just doing this to show you something that you're familiar with. And you move them with the move tool. And I don't need to get them exactly right. Command C, Command V. I can just kind of mock them up in a way that's pretty general, just using that large selection tool and the shape tools. And then maybe Command C, Command V again, and do something over here. Now, what's nice about using vector shapes is they're all going to use as few anchor points as possible. So you see this ellipse, this oval, it only has 4 anchor points. The anchor points are the little squares with the white inside and red surrounding them. So there's one right there, there's one right there, there's one right there. Now, what did I do? I just used the small selection tool. The small selection tool is how you can individually select anchor points. And when you do that, then you can actually stretch just that anchor point. So if I want to make this root more pointy, I have to click off and then hover with the small selection tool, the white arrow, and click very precisely on that point. So the first creators, developers of Illustrator, I think it was Macromedia, they only had a mouse interface. So everything in Illustrator is still designed for precise selecting, right? Very precise clicking and then dragging. So it's actually can be hard to do parts of Illustrator with a tablet. But they've added tools that give you more functions. So this is kind of the most basic way. I can select the whole thing, see where the anchor points are, click off of it, hover over the anchor point I want to move with the small selection tool, and then adjust it, right? Click it, click off of it, find the anchor point I want to mess with, and switch it. Now, this doesn't mean, and I can mess with all 4, this does not mean that I can't then use the large selection tool and change it in a big way at the same time. So what's better than warp to get the exact shape you want? The small selection tool, clicking on the anchor points and being able to manipulate them. Now you'll notice the selection tool alone does not allow you to make new anchor points. But because you can have either straights or curves coming out of each path, you can manipulate the different sides of the curves. And that's the most efficient way to make vectors, by pulling on the anchor points and then using what are called the Bezier handles to adjust the curves on either side. So if you're brand new to Illustrator, that's a good way to get started. Like I said, it's not like the #1 way it's designed to work, but that is fairly familiar. So for instance, if I turn off my sketch for a minute, don't worry about the stuff I'm covering up on the inside, we'll get to that. But notice how that's flowing pretty well, right? But if I want it to flow even better, I can then click this one, and then I can click on this anchor point. Oh, I got to get the right one though. Whoop. And I got to click off of it and then hover over it. So this is where it can get tricky because it's auto-selecting. So if I use the drop down on the layer, I can individually select vector shapes, like my rectangles on the bottom, and I can lock the others, just like you can lock a layer, so that it's only able to select from the rectangle. And that way I can hover over this without the other thing interfering, and I can play with where that anchor point is. Now, how is this anchor point different? This rectangle. You'll notice that there's no curves to play with. So these are what's called a straight anchor. And how do I convert that into be curves? Well, there's 2 ways. One way is I can use what's called the cornering tool. I'll show you at the top because it will be really obvious. So I'm with the small selection tool. I'm on a straight shape, so it has only straight lines coming in and out of it. Remember, vectors can be curved or straight. I click on that point. I don't get a Bezier handle because there's no curve, but I want to create a curve. So what I can do is click on this little circle and create a rounded edge. Now what that does is give me 2 anchor points for the one of the corner, and then when I click on those, 1/2 of those has a curve, and the other half of it is straight. So what can I do? I can play with that curve on both sides. So I'll do that here. I'm going to use the rounding tool, which will first kind of split the difference really evenly if you want it really clean. But then if you click on those individual anchors, you can play with those curves